Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, the great climate debate. Here we are, part 2. We could have a part 3, a part 4, a part 5. Who knows before it's over? Pennsylvania politics and government, in depth and in detail. And guess what? It all starts right now.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the show. Well, we're going to skip politics for a while. We're going to do some shows on climate change. We had Penn Future on a couple of weeks ago. We now have some folks from the business community who are going to talk about the great climate change debate. It's big, it's important, it's something that all of us should pay attention to. Sitting across from me are a couple of guests. Steve Winberg, he's the VP of Research and Development for Consol Energy. When we get to you later, you can tell us what Consol Energy, we'll give you a little promotion time. Next to him is Stephanie Wisman. She's Director of Governmental Affairs with the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. And right over here is Chris Maschantonio. I got that right?
Yes, you did.
See, there you go. He's the Head of Government Affairs with United States Steel, General Manager of State Government Affairs. All right. Look, let me start with a basic question. We're all confused here. Steph, let me start with you. We're all confused. We're into this business of the science. Has it been challenged successfully by critics who say, you all talked about the Himalayan glaciers, glaciers melting. Then we talked about what will happen down in the Amazon River Basin in 40 years. Will it all be gone? Then we have this problem over with the Climate Research Unit in the University of East Anglica, where, you know, its director, Phil Jones, has quit. Help us out. How can our viewers make some sense out of this climate change debate?
And you know, that's a great question, Terry, and I'll tell you this, because of your very question, that's why the science isn't settled. There are divergent opinions on where this whole climate change issue is going. Is it really happening? And what is the cause of it? Is it really man-made reasons for greenhouse gas emissions, if indeed the world is warming? But also, as we all know, plants and animals also emit natural, greenhouse gas emissions. So when you talk about climate change, especially in the political arena, and you look at it from a policy side, people are trying to get at, okay, what is the reason for quote-unquote global warming? How much of it is attributed to man-made causes versus natural causes? And indeed, is it really warming the planet?
Well, the interesting question is, I noticed that Phil Jones said that, well, now he's not sure it is warming, that during the Middle Ages. I mean, the climate goes through these periods where it does get warmer and then it doesn't. I mean, we can't even figure out if we've gotten warmer in the last 10 years. I can't go to 2 different sources and Steve, get some information that you know to rely on.
Well, Terry, that's exactly right. There are a lot of data out there, and people are trying to pull all these data together, and then there's bad data out there. There's for example, a lot of the global warming data is coming from weather stations that are positioned in heavy urban areas, so they're getting the natural effect of concrete and asphalt and building walls and that sort of thing. A lot of that data is bad data. But I think more importantly than that is not whether the science is there, and I think it isn't there. I don't think the science is there so that we can make good legislative decisions, especially in a time when our economy is pretty flat. Maybe we're coming out of the recession, maybe we're not. But do we want to impose fairly stringent regulations on energy and cause an increase in energy prices? And then even if we do that and the rest of the world doesn't, what have we done to ourselves economically? And I think that's the question.
Let's turn to that. I mean, look, you work for and represent, not arguably, a huge employer, very important to the economy of the state. And, again, notwithstanding what side you are, you come to this debate. I mean, you employ, I don't know, not
5,000 in Pennsylvania.
Just 5,000 people, that's all, a little something like that. So how is this debate sort of affecting you, and how has your company reacted to this situation?
Well, thank you, Terry. It's an important topic for us. We need to address it in 2 areas. The cost of electricity that Steve referred to is very important to us because we're a large energy consumer. To make steel in an integrated steelmaking process, you insert a lot of energy into that process. the result is there are emissions also, CO2 emissions from that process. So we see it on the emission side and the energy consumption side. We will leave the science to the scientists, but we do what we can as a company, following good business practices, to help provide a quality product in an energy efficient manner. And just by way of example, the American steel industry over the last 10 years has reduced emissions by over 33%. We've improved energy efficiency by 33%, and resulting emissions are down 33%. That's beyond what the Kyoto Protocol would even require.
Have you been counting this? I mean, you know, some of this, a little, but you probably need
not
to...
necessarily.
Well,
I mean, we talk about it.
I mean, that's important, I think.
The American steel industry is probably the best performing industry in the world on this topic. So.
All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to pay some bills, talking about business, and then we'll come back with Climate Change Debate Part 2.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by PAConstructionJobs.com. For more information about rewarding careers in the highway construction industry, visit PAConstructionJobs.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program. While we're doing climate change, I think we're going to be doing a bunch of programs on it. It's probably healthcare, climate change, the economy. I don't think there are any more subjects that we could chat about that are more important than that. All right, Steph, let's talk a little bit. I mean, you know, we have this ClimateGate legislation. It passed the House of Representatives. It's in the Senate. It doesn't look like it's going anywhere. From your point of view, what do you think, you know, are sort of a sensible governmental approach, federal governmental approach to deal with climate change? If you want to chat about some of this legislation, do so.
No, that's fine, too. And the Chamber has always said that if you're going to deal with the issue of climate change, it must be done at the federal level, because air is not bound by boundaries. It just isn't. And you have to look at it from an international perspective, because it's not just the United States we're talking about, it's the world. In regard to the legislation at the federal level, of course, the Waxman-Markey bill that you referenced is in the Senate. It passed by a very slim margin in the House of Representatives, 7 votes. So right there, you're going to have an uphill battle in the Senate, and that's why it's sort of on the back burner right now. You still hear people talking about the bill, but of course, health care has kind of, you know, been at the prominent issue at the moment. But this is not going away, that is for sure. But I really think it's an uphill battle for the proponents right now because of the makeup of the Senate, when you take a look at that.
Is there anything in there? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I agree with Steph, both in the House and the Senate. I don't think these bills can go anywhere politically, but more importantly, they have a very steep glide path on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And if you think about our energy infrastructure, we've built this over 150 years. And what these two bills are asking for is to reduce our CO2 emissions down to levels that we were at in 1911 when we had 90 million people in this country. Now we have 300 million people. So they want to reduce emissions in about a 20 to 30 year period when it's taken us 150 years to build out this infrastructure.
Now,
is the
question reducing? I mean, everybody says, okay, we can reduce it. Is it the rapidity with which they want to reduce them, or is it the nature of the reduction? Any one of you?
I think it's probably both. First, we can't do it as fast as legislation contemplates. Can we do it over time? Sure. There's technologies out there that are being developed. In fact, in my industry, in the coal industry, I think within a 15-year period of time, we could be operating a coal-fired electric generating station with 0 emissions.
Do you use coal? I mean, how do you... Go ahead.
Yes, we are. We're a consumer of coal for our coking process. Coal is one of the raw materials, coal, iron ore, and limestone. You put those items together and add a lot of energy, and you're producing iron and further processing the iron for steel. So there's a lot of energy involved, and there is a carbon source involved. Our concern with the legislation is more with a global disadvantage from a competitiveness standpoint for American manufacturers.
Raises your price at cost? Is
it's
that
basically adding cost to a ton of coal. When it all comes down to it, that's what it's doing. And there really cannot be a solution, Terry, unless the solution involves developing countries. We can't place these additional burdens on American manufacturers, and no one else is going to adhere to those.
And from what I gather, you know, China in particular is reluctant to agree. Do I got that right? And India, is there also a problem with both of those countries? Huge. The other thing, we've had, you know, Governor Rendell has been on, and he's a big supporter of clean coal. Is that, and we have a plant, what, up in Schuylkill County? Is there, I think, a plant there? Is that something doable for your industry?
Oh, absolutely.
It looks like I got on a topic you want to go into.
Sure, you bet. You know, the definition of clean coal has evolved over the last 30 to 40 years, as it should be. Back in the 50s, we were worried about particulate emissions, the smoke coming out.
Right.
Then we were worried about SO2 for acid rain, and then NOx, and then mercury. Now the new definition of clean coal is zero or little CO2 emission. So each time that the definition has changed, industry has stepped up, developed technology, and implemented it. We can do it once again. The question is, does the American public want to pay the cost to do that at this point in our history?
Yeah, well, the other thing, and I think we'll go to break on this, the President Obama is putting up, I get the right figure here, $8.3 billion in loans to Southern Company to build 2 new nuclear reactors. And if I understand this, that they would be the first 2 new reactors built in something like 30 years.
That's correct.
Plus, we also have nuclear plants in Pennsylvania that aren't working up the capacity. So we've had folks here who've said, gee, if we could internally upgrade the nuclear facilities we have, we wouldn't have to build new plants. We could generate any... Is that something that's viable, do you think, from an energy production standpoint?
Sure, absolutely. And we need it all. I mean, to meet the future energy demands of Pennsylvania and the world, we need all forms of energy going forward, including nuclear, coal, natural gas, wind, solar, everything.
Yeah. All right, we're going to hold that thought. Sure. We'll come right back to you. We come back, let's talk a little bit about the state situation. We focused on the federal government, and we're getting a little better understanding of climate change and certainly the viewpoint of the business community, and we'll be back following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Climate change is a subject. You wanted to make a point about the natural resource aspect of it.
Thanks, Terry. Just to follow up on Stephanie's point, I mean, Pennsylvania is really blessed to have natural resources that support our energy sector, and this has been, historically Pennsylvania's strength.
Right.
Whether it's coal, natural gas, nuclear, we have those resources, and there's a great effort underway in southwestern Pennsylvania called the Energy Alliance, where these energy sectors are working together to develop and attract capital investment in these sectors, and that's something public policymakers really ought to be looking at, developing what we have.
Well, in addition to that, if you look at the other resources that we have in Pennsylvania, we've got water resources, we've got university systems, we've got the United States Department of Energy's National Energy Technology Lab in Pittsburgh, plus all of the natural resources in our workforce. I think Pennsylvania could be the nexus for the next generation of technology, whether it's coal or nuclear or even renewables and natural gas. We've got Marcellus Shale. Pennsylvania is really blessed with a lot of resources, both human and natural.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any doubt that makes this debate unusually important for our state. I mean, regardless of the side you're on and what position you take, I mean, there isn't any doubt that our state, positioned as it is with all of these various kinds of energy resources, puts it at, talking about the state, state policy, what's the general direction as you see it now in terms of state policy?
Yes. Act 70 of 2008 was passed by the legislature that charged DEP in consultation with a climate change advisory committee to advise DEP on a climate change action plan for the state of Pennsylvania. That particular report has been delivered to the governor and the legislature back in December of 2009. Now it's in the hands of the legislature to determine, okay, do we want to do something with this? Because right now they are just that. They are recommendations. Now, what will have to happen is having legislators introduce legislation to implement some of the pieces of it.
What are the big 2 or 3 things in that?
Well, there's something in there that's not a work plan per se, but it's a recommendation. It's a goal that Pennsylvania reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30% to year 2000 levels by year 2020.
All right, stop right there.
Very aggressive.
That's important. Is that doable? Anybody want to weigh in on that? Difficult?
It's a steeper glide path down than what we're seeing in the national front. So I think the concern, of course, is if we reduce emissions in Pennsylvania more than the other 49
I've heard
states,
that argument.
what does that do for us economically?
Yeah. So does that go back to one of you made the point about if we're going to have a policy, it ought to, you did, a federal policy and not, I mean, for you have operations not just in Pennsylvania, right?
Right.
Of course.
Right. Yeah, we have them throughout the U.S. and around the world. And during this debate, you hear a term regarding the Waxman-Markey bill called carbon leakage.
Right.
Carbon leakage is defined as the transfer of manufacturing and industry over to developing nations that may not have a carbon regime or a cap-and-trade system.
Right.
When we hear carbon leakage, we really think about human suffering, because following those manufacturing jobs will be unemployment here in this country, families facing economic hardship, communities that rely on those factories, those mills for their tax base. That's a real concern, especially for Pennsylvania.
Number 2. Another idea out of the state legislation in addition to the 30% cap.
Yes. Well, there are 52 recommendations contained within this action plan. 75% of those work plans that are contained within were unanimously adopted by the members of the Climate Change Advisory Committee. So they approved 75% of these 52 work plans.
Were there business folks on that?
Yes, there was. Yes.
So what you're saying is 75% of them the business community could in general support.
That's correct, because it's either little or no cost, voluntary measures for the business community.
So you're arguing over the 25%.
We are, but they're very significant.
Oh, I got it. I'm not suggesting you're not.
Yes.
I understand. One of the 75 could be a
Yes.
game changer from your point of view, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, let's go to break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about what, in a perfect world, what would you want? What should Pennsylvania be doing in your view of a perfect world where climate change is concerned? And we'll be back following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
All right, welcome back. Climate change. This is part 2. We're going to do some additional shows on it. I hope you find this as fascinating as I do. All right, I'm going to give each of you a chance. All right, what do you think is the most important thing that you would like to see happen in this debate, whether it's Pennsylvania, the federal government, or from your industry? We'll start here and go around. Go ahead.
Terry, I would say recognizing companies that are doing the right thing environmentally, voluntarily, I think needs to be recognized, such as U.S. Steel, Chris had mentioned before. The strides that they're making to reduce their carbon footprint, they're doing this without mandates. They're doing this on their own because it's good business. That needs to be recognized by lawmakers, what's already happening, and actually looking at the greenhouse gas emissions in Pennsylvania has actually gone down in recent years because of the voluntary measures that are being undertaken by businesses and others. So that's something that definitely needs to be recognized and put more into the forefront.
Steve.
Consol Energy, we're headquartered in Washington County, Pennsylvania. We've got about 8,000 employees. We're the only U.S. coal company with an R&D group, and we have about $55 million in R&D projects, most of them focused on greenhouse gas reduction. What's important for us, because we have our assets literally in the ground, whether coal or natural gas assets, but more importantly, this country has 250 years of coal in the ground that we can use. It's a domestic energy source, and we need, if we're going to move down this path of climate change, we need to have legislation or regulation that allows the United States to use its indigenous energy resources like coal
also
and
natural gas. That Marcellus, you mentioned that earlier. We've done some programming on that. Go ahead.
I think for us, Terry, we just want to see a public policy framework that allows us to be competitive, both in the national and the global stage. Looking at our Mon Valley Works in Allegheny County, that's the perfect model. This is one of the most energy efficient steel mills in the world. We recycle all of our industrial byproducts to heat our ovens and furnaces and to generate electricity. In fact, we generate enough electricity at the Mon Valley Works internally to power 400,000 American homes a year. That's that much less electricity we have to purchase out on the market. So we're reducing our carbon footprint, like Stephanie said. We're being responsible and efficient and making a quality product. That's all we need is a public policy to support that.
Yeah, you know, you represent the business community. Before I let you all go, you talked about the volunteer. I mean, I go so many places now, and I find so much, as you pointed out, just not just interest, but action. I mean, at our college, for example, we've got all these green energy activities going on. I mean, we're not mandated to do them, you know, whether it's faucets and with the water, and you turn, the lights go off when you leave the room, you know, and that isn't bad, is it? I mean, some of that stuff, I mean, go ahead.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the right thing to do. People, I think, are naturally inclined to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And that's absent, again, of mandates. So I really think that's just people gravitate to that.
Yeah, now, we've got about a minute left on this business of the state legislature and these recommendations that you all made. Given this environment right now with the recession and Governor Rendell leaving, is anything really going to happen? I mean, is it going to be gridlock, legislative stalemate?
Well, it's a good question. However, the governor did mention this issue during his budget address this month. He did make a plug for this, although he did misspeak slightly when he said 90% of the work plans were unanimously adopted by the Climate Change Advisory Committee. In fact, it was 75%. So he is urging the legislature to take some action based on the recommendations within that Climate Change Action Plan.
Okay. Look, I want to thank you for coming on. There you have it. We presented another point of view, which is what we do. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, you stay well.